The Woman and the Pride, a bond born in the wild. The crimson dawn stretched across the vast expanse of Pilanesberg Game Reserve, painting the South African landscape in hues of hope and warning. March rains had swollen the rivers beyond recognition, transforming gentle streams into roaring torrents that carved new paths through the ancient earth. In this wild sanctuary where nature reigned supreme, Ayanda Mbeki moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to read the language of the wilderness long before she could speak her own. At 29, Ayanda carried herself with the poise of a woman who had grown up in the shadow of lions and under the wing of wisdom. Her grandmother's village had bordered this very reserve, and she had spent her childhood listening to the night songs of hyenas and the thunderous roars that announced the presence of the true kings of Africa. Now, as a veteran ranger, she understood the delicate balance that governed this world, the unspoken rule that humans were merely observers, never participants, in the grand drama of survival that played out daily beneath the African sun. The morning air was thick with moisture, and the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil as Ayanda made her way along the familiar patrol route. Her weathered boots found purchase on the slippery rocks beside the Mzimkhulu River, which had transformed from a gentle waterway into a chocolate-brown serpent, writhing and hissing with unprecedented fury. She paused, listening to the symphony of the wild, the distant trumpeting of elephants, the chatter of vervet monkeys in the fever trees, and something else, something that made her heart skip a beat. A cry, desperate, high-pitched, and heartbreakingly young. Ayanda's trained eyes scanned the turbulent waters, and there, being swept downstream by the merciless current, was a sight that would haunt her dreams and change her life forever. A lion cub, no more than 3 months old, its golden fur darkened by the muddy water, was fighting against the inevitable pull of the river with the fierce determination that only comes from pure, unadulterated terror. Every fiber of her ranger training screamed against intervention. The golden rule of conservation, never interfere with nature's course, had been drilled into her consciousness until it became as natural as breathing. But as she watched the tiny creature's desperate struggle, something deeper than training, something primal and motherly, overrode her professional instincts. Without conscious thought, Ayanda found herself sliding down the muddy bank, her radio crackling with static as it hit the water. The current was stronger than she had anticipated, and the water colder, shocking her system as she fought to reach the drowning cub. Rocks hidden beneath the surface scraped against her legs, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might become another casualty of the flood. But then her fingers found purchase on wet fur, and she pulled the trembling creature against her chest. The cub's claws dug through her uniform as it clung to her with the desperation of one who has seen death and chosen life. Its amber eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, seemed to look directly into her soul, and in that moment, Ayanda felt a connection that transcended species, language, and the very boundaries of her professional world. The little heart beating against her ribs was no different from any frightened child that simply wanted to live, to be safe, to find its way home. Struggling against the current, Ayanda made it to the bank, her lungs burning and her muscles screaming in protest. She had barely caught her breath when the bushes rustled with a sound that made her blood turn to ice. Emerging from the thick undergrowth came the most magnificent and terrifying sight she had ever witnessed. 4 lionesses and a massive male lion, their golden coats gleaming despite the overcast sky, their powerful muscles rippling beneath their skin as they moved with predatory grace. Time seemed suspended in amber as woman and lions regarded each other across the narrow strip of muddy ground. Ayanda remained perfectly still, the wet cub pressed against her chest, both their hearts hammering a frantic rhythm of fear and adrenaline. She understood, with crystal clarity, that she was holding something infinitely precious to these magnificent creatures, and that her life hung in the balance of their next decision. The lead lioness, a scarred matriarch, with eyes that held the wisdom of countless hunts and the love of a mother who had lost cubs to the harsh realities of the wild, approached with measured steps. There was no aggression in her posture, no preparation for attack, only an intense, almost human curiosity. As she drew closer, Ayanda could see something extraordinary in those golden eyes: recognition, and perhaps even gratitude. With trembling hands and tears streaming down her face, Ayanda slowly lowered the cub to the ground. The little one let out a weak mew that seemed to pierce the very air, a sound of reunion and relief that resonated in the deepest chambers of the heart. The lioness paused, then did something that would challenge everything scientists thought they knew about lion behavior. She bowed her magnificent head and gently licked Ayanda's outstretched hand. The sensation was surreal, the rough tongue, warm and surprisingly gentle, against her palm. One by one, the other members of the pride approached, not with the calculated movements of predators, but with what could only be described as reverence. They seemed to form a living corridor, creating a pathway back to the main trail, as if acknowledging her right to safe passage through their domain. As Ayanda began to walk slowly through this extraordinary honor guard, the rescued cub turned back, its tiny paws pattering against the wet earth, and touched her boot with its no-see farewell, as profound as any human gesture of gratitude. The tears came then, unstoppable and cleansing, as she realized she had witnessed something that transcended the ordinary boundaries between human and wild, something that spoke to the universal language of compassion that exists in all living things. The footage from her chest camera would later send shockwaves through the conservation community. Wildlife behaviorists studied every frame, trying to understand this unprecedented display of interspecies gratitude and social awareness. International media dubbed her the Lion Whisperer and Sister to the Pride, titles that both honored and embarrassed her, for she knew that what had happened was not about her expertise or bravery, but about something far more fundamental: the recognition of kindness that exists beyond species, beyond fear, beyond the artificial boundaries we create between the civilized and the wild. Months later, during another patrol along the same route, Ayanda encountered the pride again. This time, instead of retreating into the brush as lions typically do when humans approach, they remained where they were, a few hundred meters from her vehicle, resting in the dappled shade of an acacia tree. The rescued cub, now noticeably larger and stronger, lifted its head as her engine approached, and for a brief moment, their eyes met across the distance. In that moment, Ayanda understood that some bonds transcend the temporary nature of single encounters. The story had become legend in the local villages how a woman had touched the heart of the wild and found herself forever changed by its response. Children would gather around evening fires to hear how, in a world that often seems divided by fear and misunderstanding, love had found a way to build a bridge between two very different worlds. As the African sun set behind the acacia trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Ayanda sat by her campfire and wrote in her journal, "Today I learned that compassion is not bound by species, and that sometimes the greatest courage lies not in maintaining boundaries, but in recognizing when love demands that we cross them. In the space between human and wild, between fear and trust, something beautiful can be born, a reminder that we are all part of the same magnificent, mysterious tapestry of life." The stars emerged one by one in the African sky, and in the distance, the roar of lions echoed across the savannah, not a sound of threat or dominance, but a song of the wild that included in its ancient melody the story of a woman who had learned that sometimes the heart knows a wisdom that the mind cannot comprehend, and that love, in its purest form, recognizes no boundaries at all.